problem is I still don't see where it's recording us because it's not giving us a counter. Let's
Well,
just
you hit
do
record or
something.
just do, and we'll just play with it after.
See what happens. If you don't get anything, you don't get anything.
Okay.
So about 15 years ago, I was working at church offices, and I had a friend who contacted me and was talking to me at church at work. And I told him I was trying to learn more about the scriptures because I had reached a limit where I wasn't really gaining more. I had a lot of questions and no answers. And so he told me, he said, I have a book for you. And he gave me a book, lent me a book. It's called Written by the Finger of God, and it covered the scriptures in a way that I had never dealt with before, and so helped me a lot. But what I learned from that was that if you want to learn anything, you need to take the counsel that the Lord gave us in Matthew 6 or Matthew 7 to heart. And it's one of my favorite scriptures now. If you have such a thing as a favorite scripture, you don't have to turn there. Matthew 7:7, it just says, ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. And so in my experience so far, I have found that asking, seeking, and knocking makes all the difference in the world. If I'm looking for information, I either get it by personal study, by pondering, by prayer, or by the Spirit. One of those kinds of things that helps me to open my mind and understand. And so when we talk about Isaiah, I think we need to realize that there are many different sources that we can turn to. There's lots of different sources, and I've got a whole stack of books over there that have given me different insights, and I found that as I went to different places searching for that knowledge, that I would get knowledge, but I wouldn't necessarily get understanding of what I was reading. And so a particular scholar would say, oh, well, look at this, look at that, and I would get lost. And so I have found that I can trust scholars to a certain point, and then beyond that, I have to really trust the Spirit and the Lord and personal study. So I went to a book one in the process of this whole thing that someone recommended to me. It was called Figures of Speech Used in the Bible. And in that process, I learned that there are lots of different rhetorical structures, different kinds of figures of speech in the scriptures. And I thought, well, if they're there, then they must be also in the Book of Mormon, if the Book of Mormon is what it is. So I picked up a $2.50 copy of the Book of Mormon and started going through and looking for repetition, looking for figures of speech, looking for different kinds of structures that might be in the book. And we talk a lot about the Book of Mormon having repetition in it, which is really interesting because we say, and it came to pass, and it came to pass, and it came to pass, and we get a lot of repetition. But the repetition we're looking for is repetition that is of a structural sort. One of the most common ones that has come out in our day is called chiasmus. So it's where you get a repetition where you start at the beginning and the very end of the passage has the same information. As you work in towards the center or the focal point, you get this little structure that will go like A, B, C, B, A, out again. And so the material at the beginning and the end is the same material. When you get to the middle, it's the focal point. And so those were the things I was looking for. And I started going through the Book of Mormon looking for repetition. And so I marked in red, as is common, any repetition that I saw. And then when I got to 2 Nephi 6, I started marking it, and I marked 2 Nephi 6, and then when Jacob, and this is Jacob quoting Isaiah, and when I reached that point, then I got to the Isaiah passages that Jacob quotes, and then I went on doing my marking. And then I lost my copy of the Book of Mormon. It got misplaced somewhere in the house. And I thought, oh dear, what am I going to do? And several months went by and I couldn't find it. And I finally gave up. And then one day I was looking through a pile of papers, and lo and behold, there was my copy of the Book of Mormon. I was so excited. I went back and I said, okay, what was I doing? What was I marking? And so I went back and looked at what I had been doing, the patterns that I was looking for, and I said, oh, okay, now I know what I'm doing. And I got to the section in 2nd Nephi where Jacob was quoting Isaiah, and I had lots of red marking all the way down until I hit the Isaiah passage. And all of a sudden it was just black and white. No markings at all. I had just buzzed right past the Isaiah passages saying, oh, okay, I don't know what's going on here. I don't understand this. And so the part where Jacob was talking, it was all marked in red. The part where Isaiah was talking, it was all black and white. Not implying that it's simple, implying that I had not looked for repetition in those passages. So then I said, why did I do that? That was crazy. So I said, okay, I'm going to go back and look over those Isaiah passages again for repetition. And at that point I did, and suddenly, instead of being just black and white, it became almost pure red, as you can see. Just lots and lots and lots of red.
A lot of green there too.
Yeah, the green is had a different purpose. The green was to mark Jewish Tree of Life passages. And if you haven't studied the Jewish Tree of Life, then you wouldn't understand. I didn't even know the Jews had a Jewish Tree of Life, or that they even cared about the Tree of Life at all. But they do. In a lot of their studies, they have a structure called the Jewish Tree of Life, and in it has globes of light, 10 globes of light, and it's structured in kind of the form of a tree. But and so I looked for Jewish Tree of Life words as well, and so I've got both red and green. So when I got done with reading 2nd Nephi 7, 8, and 9, which is mostly the Isaiah passages that Jacob's quoting, 7 and 8, I started reading chapter 9 again. And as I was reading chapter 9, I started looking at things that I thought, well, this is familiar. I've heard this before. I've seen this before. And so I went back to the Isaiah passage, and I thought, oh, he didn't just quote Isaiah for the fun of it. He actually was talking about what he had just read to us. And so at that point, I thought, so what am I seeing in Jacob's words that are also in the Isaiah passage? And as I read chapter 9, Jacob talked about 3 things. He said it's necessary that the Creator die and be resurrected. It's necessary that the wicked die and be resurrected. And it's necessary that the righteous die and be resurrected. And so then I went back to the Isaiah passage and I started seeing things that I had never seen before. And so I guess that's kind of the beginnings of my understanding of the discourse that Jacob gives us. We stop and go back and see if you got that so
Okay.
far.